This week I'm here with Taylor Swope. Taylor is the founder of Little Hippie. Little Hippie has been around for over 3 decades.
Over 20 years. Over 2 decades.
Over 2 decades. A long time. Taylor is just that. She started out as a little hippie herself and has now grown into this awesome founder entrepreneur. And rather than just giving the whole backstory, just tell me, Little Hippie, what are you guys doing right now?
Well, right now we're doing a few things. We're doing this shop, as you can see, but we started with stuff that I make. And with the shop, I've been able to grow into selling stuff that other people make too.
So right now we're in the brick and mortar, which is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This is your first brick and mortar, right?
Yes, it is.
And how much of the stuff that's in here is stuff that you made?
At the moment, it's kind of a small percentage because we're working in Las Vegas right now for the Den Company Sphere residency.
Love it.
So much of the stuff that I make is in Las Vegas. So
Got it. So you pulled stuff from the store, shipped
Yes.
out there.
Yes.
And a lot of the stuff, being that it's at the Sphere, it's not all Dead&Co stuff. You also have, let's say, Grateful Dead and Fish stuff there also?
it's just Grateful Dead stuff.
Just Grateful Dead
Yeah,
stuff.
so
Tell me more about that.
So I've been licensed by Grateful Dead for 20 years, and that was what I built my business with for a long time. And so we still do a lot of Grateful Dead related events. Dead and Company is the biggest Grateful Dead related band at this point. It's a misnomer to consider it Grateful Dead because the name Grateful Dead retired when Jerry Garcia died. So
Touche.
Dead and Company is its own thing. People get very sensitive about that. But so we're
Gotta respect the community.
gotta respect it, right? So so we go to different Dead and Company shows and we sell stuff at the shows along with a lot of other vendors. I built the business at music festivals. When I first started the business, there weren't a lot of big Grateful Dead related bands. There was kind of a vacuum that happened after Jerry Garcia died where there was a bunch of attempts at carrying it on through other lineups, but none of them had the weight that Dead and Company does.
Attempts?
Yeah, I mean, there were a bunch of other bands with various members of, original members of the Grateful Dead. And some of them did okay. They would do, arena tours in the summer or like amphitheater tours in the summer. And they would do okay, but none of them were great.
Would you go to those events?
Yeah, I did. I went to a good amount of them. That's how I got licensed in the first place. Was I was selling stuff when I had first started the business. I was at one of those shows.
When you first started and you got the license, how competitive was it? Do other people, and how many do you think had the license?
To get a license.
Yeah.
It's very different now than it was
I bet.
then. When I first started, it was still being managed by the band.
Oh, it's amazing for you.
Yeah, I guess you'd kind of consider me like a legacy licensee in that regard. Only for 2 years. 2 years after I signed my license, they closed their offices and they they licensed the whole thing to Rhino Entertainment, which is part of Warner Music. So I've been working with Rhino Entertainment for now 18 years. But my first 2 years were with Grateful Dead Productions, which itself isn't the original merchandising company. First, when it was still Grateful Dead, it was Grateful Dead Merchandising. Then it became Grateful Dead Productions after Jerry Garcia died. So there's a lot of iterations. But to answer your question, at that time it was competitive, but it wasn't. It wasn't that much in demand. So there were people that were kind of still hanging on from the original Grateful Dead days, but there weren't a lot of people that were trying to get into the Grateful Dead business. And that took a long time to change. And what changed that was in 2015 when the band did the 50th anniversary shows, which are called Fare Thee Well. All of a sudden, there was like this resurgence of Grateful Dead interest.
Well, that plus social media, which elevated it to the masses more than it even could have been possibly done 10, 15 years prior.
The timing of Fare Thee Well with the explosion of Facebook groups cannot be overstated how much those two played into each other.
Did Live for Live Music play a role in this?
Live for Live Music is one of those publications that I feel like has always been around, but probably hasn't. But I mean, I see their links all the time, for sure. I don't know how much they did to to. I mean, obviously they promote everything,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I would pin any kind of responsibility on them for
Yeah, I just
having.
like to throw it out there because
Do you know them?
so a good friend of mine started it.
Oh, that's great.
I remember when he started out of his apartment years ago, and it was just a Facebook group
Yeah.
for
Oh,
people
was
who,
it?
yeah, it was
Oh,
just a
wow.
Facebook group for people who live for live
Yeah.
music. And then I just remember the membership growing
Yeah.
like wildfire. And then Kunj, who started it, good friend of mine, uh, he then was able to turn it into a big business. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I see Live for Live Music links almost every day now,
I
but
love
I
that.
didn't realize it started as a Facebook group. That's
Yep. It
interesting.
was just a Facebook group for people who love live music.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, Facebook groups were really at their peak, I would say, or really emerging as like a dominant communication method at the same time as Fare Thee Well happened. And so all of a sudden, you had this just groundswell of deadheads who had been pretty dormant for a long time, almost 20 years for some of them, and and now they have this massive communication structure and the biggest shows in rock and roll history. I mean, there's still, as far as I know, no shows that have sold better than those shows. The demand for those tickets was absolutely off the charts. So the
That's awesome.
secondary market, everything. I mean, it was just unbelievable what happened with those shows. And so with the Facebook groups, all of a sudden you had tons of people selling Grateful Dead stuff, none of it licensed. And so they had this platform where they could just post stuff they were making and reach a huge audience. And so
Yeah.
suddenly tons of people wanted to make Grateful Dead stuff again. And there'd always been people making it. I mean, the interest in Grateful Dead never went away. It just got kind of sleepy for a while. So before Fare Thee Well, the core group of licensees that had kind of carried over from the original licensees had dwindled, and I was one of 9 licensees at that point, which was told to me later by one of the Rhino execs. But at the time, I knew that it was quiet. I didn't know how quiet it was.
Is 9 on a small amount?
Very.
Okay.
Yes. And then Fare Thee Well happens. All of a sudden, Grateful Dead is on the map again. People are talking about it all year. Tons of Deadheads are out and about, and there's a hunger for this music again. People have a great time at these shows. They want more of this music, and they want more of this experience. And there's also a whole new generation, which keeps happening with Grateful Dead. Now, next year is 60 years, so it's like, it just keeps bringing in new people.
I love that. My 17-year-old nephew is a Dead&Co fan.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's cool that you use that term, because I say that now that like Den Company's been around now 9 years. Like they have their own fans. Like
Yep.
it's its own thing. And so so Fairly Well happens, and then all of a sudden this interest is just like bubbling over. And at the same time, Rhino started building a really great team to handle it. And so one of the things that's been interesting about being there for 20 years, or being in licensing for 20 years, is that I've watched so many people come and go through the licensing team. And so I watched this group of women, and it was women, which was really cool since rock and roll is so male dominated. It was a group of women at Rhino that most of them came in as interns and worked their way through this. It's the same job progression. Like I watched each one of them get the same promotions, and then there was a core group of these women, like 4 of them, for a bunch of years, and they built an amazing licensing program. And the woman who was at the helm of it just did a phenomenal job building this, and it turned into over 100 licensees. And then it got to the point where people became very disparaging, like, oh, Grateful Dead's on everything. Anyone can get a license. It's,
And while they're doing this,
Yeah.
are they reaching out to you at all to see, hey, you're one of the, not the first 10, you're one of the first 9. Maybe you might have been one of the first 4 or 5. Are they asking you for advice, or more so
Absolutely
a
not.
testimonial?
Not one bit.
Nothing?
0? Absolutely not at all.
That seems foolish.
It
Right?
seems
like
like a bit of a...
You reach out to one of the OGs, and even if they don't like what they hear, they could just like brush it off and not care what you say. But you would have some perfect intel as to what they should and could do.
I have historical perspective
Yeah.
that there's no way they can have, because they just haven't been there as long. It seems like an untapped resource for sure, but maybe it's just not one they need. I'm not sure. But no, I've never been tapped in that way at all. And so, and as far as being an original, I mean, there's lots of companies that existed before me because I'm not old enough to have been there at that point. But a lot of them just moved on when Grateful Dead, the original band, when it ended. A lot of the people who were involved in the first place just moved on with their lives in different ways.
Well, they had probably been in the game and deep into it for decades.
Yeah,
Like,
and
I'm thinking back, decades.
yeah, right? And for some, it was like, if it's not going to be Grateful Dead, then it's not going to be rock and roll. There's no, there's nothing else. There's no lateral move. You just do something else, So, I, I was basically a kid when this all happened, so I can't like speak to their experience, but yeah, for me, it was really, I was part of something that was really pretty sleepy for a long time. And people would always say to me, like, Grateful Dead is dead, get over it, move on. Like, people were pretty discouraging to me about continuing this business. And during those years, I was doing a lot of music festivals, and you can't go to a music festival without hearing Grateful Dead. Every band, if they're not a cover band, at least plays a Grateful Dead song, So now festivals are more electronic. You're not going to hear as much of it. But when I was doing it, festivals were still very much, rock and roll based. And so you heard Grateful Dead constantly. So even if you didn't have any of the original members there and whatever bands they were playing with at the time, you still always had the music. And so there's Grateful Dead fans in every crowd, no matter what, So I could sell stuff everywhere, but I had to sell other things too. So at music festivals, it was a more diverse crowd, and my booth at festivals was more like this shop, like behind you there's a sunglass rack. I've been selling sunglasses for 20-something years.
Well, that's easy at a festival. It sounds like a no-brainer.
No-brainer, absolutely. Like I did the first 15 Bonnaroos. I sold thousands of pairs of sunglasses over the first 15 Bonnaroos. Like we had a table in front of the booth that was just for sunglasses, and so I would pay a lot of my overhead just by selling sunglasses. And back then, I was living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, not far from the wholesale district. And so I would go to the wholesale district and I would buy boxes of sunglasses and cart them home and then take them to the festivals.
And your markup is probably like a 3-4x.
Sunglasses have very high markup.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those items that has like...
Especially if you have the opportunity of buying them in wholesale in New York City
and
bringing them to Bonnaroo. I'm at least 4x, if not more.
Yeah, I mean... The thing about sunglasses is they get damaged quickly, so you end up throwing...
Yeah, but that's the thing about buying
part of the
cheapo
markup.
sunglasses.
So, like, on paper, your markup might look like even better than 3 to 4, but the end result is probably somewhere around there because you end up, like, damn it, with, throwing them out. Because they get... As soon as they get thumbprints on them or, scratched or anything, they're worthless. So they have to sell quickly to maintain their value, and then you usually end up having a bunch you just dump at the end. But regardless, they supported me. Like, I built my business and in the early years on on the markup from sunglasses. That was how I covered my overhead.
I love that. So sticking with talking about early business, let's go even before that.
Yeah.
Before Taylor was a Little Hippie, how did you get into this? How did you get into Grateful Dead? Tell me about like middle school, high school. Where did it all begin?
Sure. It did start right in that transition from middle school to high school, actually. So I grew up mostly in Connecticut. My family moved a fair amount, and we moved to San Diego when I was going into 8th grade. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Literally opposite end of the country. You went from northeast to southwest.
Yeah.
One tip to another.
Huge change.
How was that impact on your life?
It was really hard. And it was a really hard age to do it at. Whereas my sister, who's a year younger than me, she did it going into 7th grade. And everyone was new in 7th grade. And I was like the only new kid in 8th grade. And so she had the time of her life. Like, she had a great experience moving to San Diego in 7th grade. Went to like 50 bat mitzvahs that year, bar and bat mitzvahs. Like her social life, like just like blossomed. And then she ended up going to college in Southern California. Like, we had completely different experiences just because of that 1 year age difference.
Were you and are you two different people to begin
Very.
with? Okay.
Yes, yes. Were and are, yes. And that obviously has something to do with it too. But so I went into eighth grade as like this weird kid from the Northeast that just didn't fit in at all to San Diego.
Would you call yourself an introvert?
Yeah, I definitely, as far as the definition of do I recharge by spending time alone? Yes, 100%.
Is that the definition of introvert?
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I know, I mean, I think there's a few, but my
Yeah.
understanding is that extroverts get energy from socializing and introverts get it from spending time alone. And so, and that is how I am a very social person. I do love to be around
Yeah.
people and connect.
You literally have probably talked to more people than 99% of America.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm working events, it is like,
Thousands of people a day.
Yeah, it's a lot of being extroverted, and then I'm like, I need my time. I need quiet. And even like and I'll go back to your question in a second, but even if I travel with a group or something, like I went on a trip to Mexico this winter with a whole bunch of people to go to a Grateful Dead festival, and I made a point to take an hour every day to myself. And I ran into one of the friends that I saw there just last weekend in Las Vegas, and I was talking to him about that, and he was like, that's what was wrong. And he realized, he's like, I had a great time. He's like, but that's what I needed, And so I knew that it feels weird. You feel like you're missing out. You feel like you're separating from the group.
Hell no.
But I knew I need that hour every day.
Yeah, it's like people who meditate. It's like
Yeah.
getting that 20 minutes a day of meditation to just disconnect and be one with yourself, and then
Yeah.
go back out
And then
into
I'm
the
better.
world.
I'm better the rest of the time. I can do better because I took that time. So anyways, I obviously didn't know any of this about myself in eighth grade, So I go to eighth grade in San Diego, have a terrible time, like really, really hard here. And then we go back to Connecticut for the summer, and I run into people that I had known, before moving. And during this time, everyone's still writing letters and making mixtapes. And so eighth grade, it's the year that, I think it's the year after Nevermind came out, but it's like Pearl Jam 10. It's like all the big grunge bands. Like I'm in Southern California when grunge is at its absolute peak, So we're sending, my friends in Connecticut and I, we're sending mixtapes back and forth of like all this music. And then the week I get back to California for ninth grade, I get a tape from Connecticut that says, you should check out the Grateful Dead. And I did, and that changed my life.
So before this, you're listening to like 90s are defined by grunge.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's like grunge and hip hop.
Yeah.
Like really took the 90s by storm.
Yeah.
You were on the grunge side, and then someone's like, slipped you a mixtape. Trust me, listen to this.
Yeah, totally. And I was really into snowboarding too. And so snowboarding was all about like underground music, like Dinosaur Jr. and like, just things like that. So I was into that whole world, dyed my hair purple, like was very depressed and dark for eighth grade. And then someone gives me the Grateful Dead. And it is like, it's this light, and it's that music changed everything for me then. And what also happened at the same time is I'm going to school in Southern California, and I'm at a private K through 12 school. And there's the head groundskeeper, the head custodian is a huge deadhead. And he's driving around on his golf cart, like on the campus every day. He's got one of those ponytails down to here with like an elastic band, like every few inches, And everyone knows he's a deadhead. And he's like friends to all the students. Like he's just like the nicest guy. And we had to do a class project in my English class early in the year that was like present a poem, and we were allowed to do a song. So I chose a Grateful Dead song, and
What song?
I chose Ripple, and this is obviously before the internet. Like I couldn't just Google the lyrics. I had to try and transcribe the lyrics myself. So I did my best. I got some wrong, and I present this to my class, and I'm like laughed out of the room. Like they're like, "What is this country nonsense?" Like they are just like not cool about it at all. But my English teacher, he's cool, and he goes to the head custodian and he says, "I have this student. She's interested in the Grateful Dead." So that guy, the head custodian, starts making me tapes. And so if you know anything about Grateful Dead, the whole history is that they allowed the audience to tape the shows, and every show is different. So there's this huge archive of recordings. They played, I can't remember, something thousands of shows or something. So like there's all this music out there, and everyone back then used to trade tapes. And so this guy starts giving me tapes, and back then he seemed old, but he was probably in his 20s or something, right? But he's bringing tapes to school and giving them to me, which is like the coolest thing that anyone could have done for
so
me then.
cool.
And like so like unbelievable that even happened, And anyway, so he's doing this, and it's a lifeline, And so ninth grade is still like definitely challenging. I've made a few new friends, but I'm still just struggling. Like San Diego's not the place for me, which is funny now because I'd probably get along great living there.
Yeah, you thrive. But like also, as a 14-year-old just moved, not really finding your groove. It's hard to get in a groove when you don't have it at that age.
Yeah.
Especially when, I don't know what it was like being 14 and not having I didn't have social media when I was 14.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine what it was like. You probably went to school and then kind of were just on your own.
I was, and we also lived half an hour from where the school was, and since it was a private school, people were spread out all over San Diego County. So it's not like I went from living in a neighborhood in Connecticut where I could ride my bike to my best friend's house, and like now I'm like on a busy road where I can't even walk down the street and I need a ride to get everywhere, but I'm pre-driving age and all that stuff, So it was definitely tough. And so Grateful Dead was like just this lifeline in the middle of all that.
So Grateful Dead shines a light on your life. And then you get to high school.
Yeah.
How was high school?
So that's ninth grade. And then we moved back to Connecticut for 10th grade. And so we left. We were just there those 2 years. We go back, and it's not any better, really. It's a little better because I knew more people and I was back in like a more familiar environment, but I just really struggled with high school. I struggled with school in general. College I wasn't good at. Like just socially, like school was never good for me. So I ended up leaving high school a year early. I only did two years back in Connecticut, and then I left before graduating at the end of my junior year.
And what'd you do?
I went to college, and then I ended up graduating college a semester early. So I was 20 when I was done with school. And
where'd you go to college?
I went to Skidmore in Saratoga.
Okay, so you were an artist.
Yeah, I grew up wanting to be a writer. And so I was big in the English program, like that English teacher in San Diego I mentioned. Like he really ended up being like a mentor to me that year. I ended up winning like the department English award for the whole year. Like I was on a track of, writing, and I took creative writing classes when I got back to Connecticut, and I entered local creative writing competitions and did well. And so that's what I was really into. And I went to college as an English major, and just like I grew up wanting to be a writer, like since I was a kid. And then in college, I started taking some photography classes. I went to Paris. I also spoke French, and I ended up doing a double major in French. And
so at this point, are you going to shows yet?
A little bit,
but where are your parents with like allowing you to venture out? Are they seeing the effect that writing and music is having in your life? And also to kind of swing back to San Diego, was it noticeable that you might have went from this depressed state to a maybe not depressed state, and there had to have been some magic button, and that magic button being the Grateful Dead?
I'm going to remind you that parents then were very different than parents now.
Touche.
Yeah. No, did they notice that? I don't think they were involved, and that's a tricky one to answer for sure. They didn't know what to do with me. They really didn't. Did they want to see me do well? Of course.
And be happy?
Yes, of course they wanted that, but did they know how to help me? No, they didn't. And my dad wasn't very involved. Like he was busy trying to support the family. And another thing that happened in San Diego is that he started his own business. So we moved to San Diego. He's
doing what?
He's an actuary. And
what does an actuary do?
They design pension plans and administrate them. And so
Exciting.
yes, thrilling, right? But it's actually, I mean, it's not something I would know anything about if it wasn't for him, but
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating to learn about. It's all about studying life expectancy and
Yeah, listen, you could
demographics and
anything if you look at it from a glass
yeah,
half full could be
yeah.
exciting.
He has a master's in statistics. You know, I mean, it's interesting in its own way. But we moved there because he got a job with a business, a private business. He had been on Wall Street when we were a kid. We lived in Greenwich. He commuted on the train. I never saw him as a kid because he was always either commuting or working or flying somewhere for the day for a meeting or whatever. And then he goes to work for this private company in San Diego. It was run by a couple. They got divorced, so the company fell apart. So he decided he wanted to start his own company, and he's still running it. He's turning 80 in a couple
wow.
weeks or a few weeks, and he's still running that same business he started when I was in middle school.
Damn.
So he hires me to do his data entry work. And so I'm 14, 15, living in San Diego, doing his data entry work. And this is when data was coming on fax paper that rolled up, you know, like the
Yeah.
shiny paper that would come
With
in rolls.
with the holes in the side, you have to rip off.
That was printer paper.
Okay.
Yeah, the fax was like this like weird shiny paper that came. Yeah, so you'd have to like weight it down to be able to read it. You know, kind of like receipt paper. You know, thermal
wow.
printer. So
I don't even remember that.
no, I don't think you would. And so I'm doing his data entry work. This is what I'm doing as like my first job as a teenager. And then all the money I made from him, I would spend on more music. And he would drive me to. We would go to Sam Goody, if you've ever heard of Sam Goody.
Of course.
And so we would drive to Sam Goody. And he also, when he moved to San Diego, he bought a Alfa Romeo Spider, which he also still has. And so this was like how I got to know my dad in the first place, was like we would take trips to Sam Goody in the Alpha, and we'd have to drive like a half hour. Like a lot of times we'd go to Pomona and we'd drive around the reservoir, and so
I love your story so far.
thank you.
Like, you should talk to a ghostwriter and.
Well, I've actually written it, but I haven't shared it yet.
This would be a great movie.
Thank you.
Or
My
book.
dream, I'll just put it out there.
Book turned into a movie.
My dream is Judd Apatow makes the movie, but let's just put that out there.
I like that.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, so I'm buying music, I'm working for him, I'm learning about you know, he's starting a business. I'm learning about this from him at this age, but I don't know yet that that's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, I think I'm just making money to buy tapes. That's all I think I'm doing at the time. So anyway, so then we go back to Connecticut, and I keep doing it. I did that all through college. Like, he would send me his data entry work while I was at Skidmore, and I would do it. So anyway, what was your question? Did they know how? Did they see the light?
Did they see you go from depressed to happy with music being in effect?
I don't think so, because they weren't music people. They aren't still. But I wasn't really going to shows yet. But what I did do in San Diego for my 15th birthday is they took me to see the Jerry Garcia band. And that's the only time I ever saw Jerry Garcia before he died. Was not Grateful Dead, but Jerry Garcia band. And that was at the San Diego Sports Arena in 1993.
Monumental day of your life.
Yeah, I wish I remembered more of it. But, you know, what's so funny is I went with these two girls, and one of them reached out to me recently. She found me online. I hadn't talked to this girl in 30 years, and she found me online recently and reached out, and we've been in communication ever
Not for
since.
nothing, because of who you are and your connection to the dead. It's crazy it took that long for her to reach out.
Okay,
if you think about
fair
it,
enough,
right?
Fair enough. I mean, it's not like I wrote back to say, how did you find me?
Right.
You know, but...
she might have actually found you a while ago and is now
possibly, yeah, possibly. And I had looked for her before, but as far as I know, she doesn't have any social presence, so I never found her. So I was excited when I heard from her. But anyway, so they took me to that show. They took me and my two friends for my birthday. They actually let us go do our own thing, and they went up to like the high seats and just waited till the show was over. It's not like they went because they thought it would be a good time. They took us to supervise, you know? So I have to give them credit for even doing that. Like, that's pretty cool that they knew that that was something that I wanted to do, and despite how much they didn't want to do it, they made it possible for me to
well,
do
listen,
it.
as legendary as he is,
Yeah.
a legend, the legend of a legend gets larger as the years go on.
Right.
Back in the mid early 90s, he was Jerry Garcia, the legend, but like he wasn't the legend that he is now
Right.
because he has stood, here we go. Legends stand the test of time.
Right.
He was still alive, so it's not like he stood the test of time.
Right.
He was at the end of his career.
Yeah.
So for them, it was, she wants to see this artist.
Yeah. And I mean, what's crazy to think now is he was only in his 50s, you know, but it's like, and like the, Bob Weir was the age I am now when Jerry Garcia died because he was the baby of the band. And so to think that he was just supposed to stop, you know, just because Jerry Garcia died, Grateful Dead was over, he was just supposed to stop. Like, I can't imagine being the age I am now and just being like, somebody else died, so I'm done. Like, that's unfathomable, you know? So,
Yep.
but you don't get that perspective until the time passes, you know? So, but it's interesting how people seem so much older until years go by,
It's
right?
life.
Yeah. So anyway, so I go back to Connecticut and I'm definitely still in like my depressed funk, and I wouldn't say I'm going to shows, but I start going out with a guy who's a musician, and we have a group of friends and they start a high school band together and we're all into this music together, and at least we have like each other to be.
You have your crew, you have your community.
And then you know, that lasts my sophomore year, and then junior year I'm kind of just like, I realize I want to get out of school, and I'm just focused on getting out of school at that point.
So you stacked up the credits.
Yeah, I had to
sure.
take 2 math classes at the same time,
Jeez.
and you know, I took the creative writing class to get another English credit, and like took no study hall, like no lunch, like I just school.
Yeah,
I just wanted
Skidmore needs to be in the rearview mirror.
out. Yeah.
Life, let's go. You graduate, and then what?
Yeah, so I graduate college. I'm 20 years old, and it is, let's see, that would be 98, 99. So I'm living in Paris at the time. I'd gone to Paris in school. Skidmore has not a campus, but like a building in Paris. So like everything transfers
Very cool.
directly. So I go my sophomore year. I love it. I go back my senior year. And then I'm there, and by the end of my junior year, I knew I could finish a semester early. So I go back to Paris knowing I'm going to be done in December, and I meet a French guy, and I move in with him. And for a minute, I think I'm going to get married and live in France forever. And looking back, I sort of regret that I didn't at least do it for a little while because it was at the formation of the EU, and I would have an EU passport if I'd done it. But I haven't been back to Europe since, so I don't know that it would have mattered. But there was a moment there where I just absolutely loved living in France and thought that that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't want to get married. And so I left. I came back to America. And what happened when I came back is I realized I'd been homesick. And that my homesickness was in the form of, I had this like really like strong craving for America, which to me meant like dirt roads and rock and roll. And so I dug out my old boxes of tapes that I hadn't listened to since high school, and I start listening to the Grateful Dead again. And it is just like, I'm home. You know, like I'm coming, I hear this music, I know all the lyrics. I haven't listened to this in like 3-4 years, and I know every word, and I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed, you know? So when I was living in Paris, I had gotten on the wait list for an apartment, the one on the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
Was owned by a friend of the family, and they had put me on the wait list, and I forgot about it. And then 2 years goes by, and they're like, hey, if you don't take the next apartment, we're taking you off the wait list. I'm like, what apartment? What
For
wait
a
list?
rent stabilized apartment.
Rent stabilized apartment. And
When you were in Paris, were you working?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't have like a visa to work, so
Okay.
I was doing a couple of things. I was tutoring English to French people, which I could find gigs through like there was a publication at the time called Fusec, which is French USA Connection. It's a website now, and so
Cool.
you would find like you'd look in the classifieds or something. And then I was also doing back then there were a lot of photographers that were people still had darkrooms back then, and Paris was, you know, people were all about like black and white, like artsy photography, and so I was modeling for photographers,
Nice.
and they'd pay me cash to just like do these black and white, you know, portrait, whatever. And so I wasn't doing a lot. I wasn't like I didn't have any much for expenses,
sure.
you know.
You're going to school there. How are you bringing in money?
Yeah. And I was doing my dad's data entry still.
That's, I guess, what we're alluding to. So you're still doing the data entry.
Yeah. So I mean, I've always been someone who pieces it together, through all different things.
And little did you know that all of this, the travel, the finding ways to make money, was all part of being an entrepreneur, being a self-starter, being a doer.
Yeah, I had no idea at all. I always knew I wanted to be creative. My mom begged me in college to take a business class. And I was like, why would I do that? I'm an artist. I don't need a business class. Well, lesson learned. But I just didn't know what I was going to do. But I just always knew, like, I was a nonconformist. And the whole, like, marriage, kids, house, picket fence, whatever order you do that in, like, that wasn't my path. I always knew that. So
and this goes to what we're about to start talking about. When you come back to America, and all of that was not what you were even thinking. It was America. It was rock and roll. Let's go see what the road has.
Yeah, I wanted to adventure. That's what I wanted. So I take this apartment sight unseen, and I drive into New York on...
Do you remember what the cost was?
Yeah, you're going to hate me.
Let's hear it.
$732.
$732.
It was a 2-bedroom apartment.
Two-bedroom apartment for
$732. Yes. And
it's amazing.
Guess how long I lived there?
18 years?
13.
13 years.
Yes. And so I throw a couple of things into my car in November, and I drive in November 17th, 1999. I drive to New York, and I walk into this apartment, and it's covered in mirrors. The entire, like, floor to ceiling covered in mirrors. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't have a lease. I have no plan whatsoever. I ended up living there for 13 and a half years. And so that's how I was able to start a business. That apartment was the biggest gift that was ever given to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm assuming one was a bedroom. Did you set up the other one as like a home office?
Nope, I rented it for $50 less than the rent for the entire time I lived there.
Oh.
So I lived there for basically nothing the whole time. I did it. You can't make money on a rent-stabilized apartment, so I paid the utilities. I took care of the apartment. I worked on it. I put a new kitchen in it. Like, I did tons of stuff to it. It was still, like, an old, beat-up apartment, but I did a lot to improve it. But I always kept the rent just under what the rent was. And I would post it on, at the time, Craigslist.
Yeah.
I would get 50 responses within a couple hours. I mean, people were happy to rent that room.
You probably could have rented it for double what you were
probably
asking.
Right. So, and it wasn't big. I mean, it was like, for most of the time I lived there, I had a twin bed in it, and there was room for a little desk. I had a decent closet, and a little bit of extra space. And then the last few years I ended up having a good friend move in. He put a double bed in it. I charged him less. Like, we were a little more equal once he moved in.
You went from free rent to paying $100 a month for rent.
Bit. Like, the longer he lived there, the more I paid, because the wiser he got to the situation. But he's still one of my very close friends, and he was great. Like, I wouldn't take that back,
Yeah, and listen, living with a homie is so much better than living with a rando.
And then what happened once he moved in was that I was traveling so much then that I started renting my room to all of our other friends. So many of our mutual friends, like, made their entry into New York through that apartment.
What was your apartment number?
It was, you mean like the street number?
No, what was your apartment number?
4F.
4F.
Yeah.
Did you ever make any 4F merch?
No, I didn't think of that.
You should do that.
That's funny. I don't know if you still can see it, but for years you could go to my old address and see a Little Hippie location tag. And people would still, like, try and call or whatever, I think it's finally gone, but I know my old apartment in Bushwick, that one might still be there too. It's hard to get rid of them.
You should make, like, even if it's just like one run of just like shirts with
4F.
Like a door that says 4F.
That's a good idea.
A door that says 4F. I'm picturing a shirt with a door that says 4F, and at the foot a mat with a Little Hippie logo.
Okay.
Or a door tag on the doorknob. With the Little Hippie logo.
You know what's funny, too, is the previous tenants had a mezuzah on the door that I never took down.
Of course.
And I was like, I'm not Jewish, but why would I take it down?
No, you don't take down a mezuzah.
No. But I did have a doormat. I can't remember what it looked like. That's a funny idea. Maybe I will. Yeah. So, I lived in apartment 4F for a long time.
Do a limited run. Make like 24 of them. See what happens.
Yeah.
You just make 24 of them for your friends.
Yeah, right.
Give them out.
Funny. Yeah, so that apartment was great, and it was a block from Central Park, and it was. I mean, it changed my life obviously to have that, you know.
So, what was the time span from moving to that apartment and getting
So
on the
that's
road?
the end of '99. Then that winter of 2000, I start working. I go to work for a photography agency. So when I'm in Paris, I get really into photography, and I go from wanting to be a writer to wanting to be a visual storyteller. And it's like this huge relief that I don't have to write, like that I can use images. And eventually I come back to both, you know, but I took like art classes in high school, but I'm not like I don't really know how to draw. Like I'm not a trained artist
Yeah,
in
but
any
regardless, your
way, you
style
know.
is your style. That's what's
Yeah.
so important about art is not trying to be the best, but being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, totally. And but I never it's not like I was like trying to be some kind of any kind of artist because I didn't consider myself to be someone with like who could paint really well. Like I would paint in high school, but like it was amateurish, you know. Like I did it because I liked doing it, but I didn't make anything that was very good. So I, you know, I'm trying to find my way. Basically, I'm trying out different mediums, and I get really into photography, and I'm into film, and I'm just that's the track now I want to go down. So I started working for this photo agency, and I you probably remember I told you this story recently. So I started working for this photo agency, and
Yeah, I
I
remember the
take the
story.
job because it's a small business. It was started by the founder in his living room, and it has this great story that resonates with me about being a small business. And 3 weeks after I start, Bill Gates buys the company, and I am like apoplectic. Like this is like the last thing I wanted to do was work for a corporation, work for Bill Gates. But he buys the company because he had started another company that people don't know about that was at the time he it was way ahead of its time, and it didn't really end up happening, but he had this vision that people would have like digital displays of rotating images in their homes. And so he starts buying up these photo agencies for their catalogs. And so this is now, you know, all of the old photo agencies, they all eventually got bought in one way or another like this. Like a photo agency represents photographers to take new pictures, but what their real value is their catalogs of stock photography, or the if it's not stock photography, it's the pictures that have already been taken that might get reused. So, you know, you hire someone to take pictures of celebrities, those pictures are going to be needed again. Or it could be something as basic as you need a picture of a storm system, or you need a picture of two people sitting on a couch doing a conversation, like,
Yeah.
so there's just like so much need for imagery. So Bill Gates buys this company, and I'm just like, what am I going to do? But I just started the job. I'm living in New
Like,
York.
fuck corporate America, fuck the man.
It was just like
This ain't me.
this was
I'm out.
not me, and this is not long after the Microsoft antitrust lawsuit. Like this is like not cool at all in any way. Like there is nothing sexy about working for Bill Gates at this
No. So how
time.
quickly did you dip after he bought it?
Pretty quickly. Like, I mean, I ended up lasting like 6 months, but the only reason I lasted even that long was because when I came on, one of the people I was an assistant to already had a leave of absence planned for the summer. So they convinced me to stay through the summer by giving me my Fridays off. So I ended up working 4 days a week through the.
Before Summer Fridays were a thing.
Yeah, totally. So I'm like, I mean, I made it work, and so I started going to Connecticut like every weekend at that point. And I was going, like, I got really into kayaking, and I'm going kayaking through all like the tidal streams. And I'm just dying to like get out and like see things. And I'm also doing this other job on the side that was taking pictures of kids on their sports teams. So, like, basically like your school picture, but your sports picture. So, like,
I had a lot of those.
yeah, I'm sure you do. And you will soon with your son,
I
right?
can't wait.
And so, you're just cranking a line of kids through and then taking the team picture, and then the next team comes through. And this was unbelievable training for me. I had no idea at the time how many kids I would take pictures of over the years. I didn't know I was going to start a clothing company for kids. And so I learned how to take pictures of kids. I took the job because I wanted to learn more about photography. I wanted photography jobs. And so I learned how to use studio lighting, and I learned how to do because like basketball would be indoors. So we'd use studio lighting. The other ones would be outside. We'd have to use flashes and bounce and all that stuff. So I learned how to do this. And but what I really learned how to do is deal with the parents on the sidelines, and how to focus on the kid and get the picture of the kid and let the kid be a kid, while also just managing the parent, who sometimes you need their help and sometimes you need them to not get involved. So it was rapid fire, excellent training for something I didn't know yet that I was going to do. And so I always look back on that experience as like, don't complain about, like, these are entry level jobs, but you don't know where they're going to take you, you know? And I also was traveling all over the tri-state area. They would send me to Long Island, to Westchester County, to up the Hudson River Valley, all over Connecticut. Like, I got to see all of these different places. And at that point, like, that was adventure. You know, like, don't send me to Sleepy Hollow now, but at the time,
Right,
like,
you're hitting the road.
yeah, like, I'm all over. And so I'm getting sent out, like, a lot of them are early morning, and then I'm done by noon or 2 o'clock, and I've got the day to go explore and do whatever I want. So
you hopping in the car, throwing on some Jerry,
yeah, something.
going,
I don't. It's funny. I mean,
going
I
to work
definitely
for-
was listening to music. Everywhere I was going, I was
Yeah.
listening to music. Yeah, and this is like when we used to like all drive with like big books of CDs in our cars. You know.
So at this point, this is like late 90s, early 2000s.
This is early 2000s.
Early
Yeah.
2000s. At this point, are you going to festivals yet?
No. So I am working at this photo agency, and I start learning about music festivals and just like a little bit. I went to a few shows in college. I saw Fish up at Lake Placid while I was at Skidmore, and I saw Fish in Paris, and I wasn't really that into any of it, but you know, my friends were going. It was a thing to do. And
Into Fish or into the festival? Or
I didn't know about festivals, were barely happening yet.
Got it.
I didn't know about festivals yet. And then, so at the photo agency, the same day that I started, this other guy started, and we rode the elevator up together and started talking in the elevator, and learned that we both liked the Grateful Dead in the 30-second elevator ride on our first day.
what were you wearing? Like, how did that even come up?
Who knows, right?
Like, was someone wearing like tie-dye socks?
I would hope not. Like, it's
right,
a
but like,
professional job.
right, so
you know?
how does Grateful Dead come up?
That is I don't know. I honestly can't remember. But I do know that we ended up like taking our lunches together, and like, you know, he was like, we were like buddies at work, you know. And so he starts a website. He leaves around the same time I do. He doesn't last much longer. He starts a website that's called Tribal Jams, and it's one of the first online directories of festivals. And so about a year later, I get clued into festivals, and I reach out to him. We had kept in touch, and he lets me use his website as a press credential. And so I start going to festivals as a photographer for Tribal Jams.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I learned about festivals. So all right, let me back up a couple steps. So I have this photo agency job. I'm producing shoots for this photographer in LA. And she comes to New York, needs an assistant. I assist on her shoot here in New York. And then we're on the phone a little later, and she says, oh, it's too bad you can't move to LA and be my assistant. And I already know I'm leaving this job. And I said, why can't I? And so I do. I just pack up, I leave the job in September. I pack up my Subaru.
It's like, say I won't.
Yeah, right.
Say I won't.
She,
Come be your assistant.
I mean, I probably shouldn't. Looking back, like, it wasn't as serious an offer as I needed it to be, but
No, but it was as serious as it's getting you the fuck
it
out.
got me out there. And I
Yeah.
have this apartment that costs nothing that I can just leave, you know? So I pack up my Subaru and I drive to LA in September of 2000. And while
Of course you drove a Subaru.
I mean, that's what I had,
Yeah.
right? I had the very first Subaru Forester, and I had that car for a long time. So I drive to California, and my sister, as I mentioned, went to college in Southern California. So she's in her senior year, and she's renting this house, and her best friend, who's still now her best friend and neighbor, drives with me to California, and we like start like. We're like living in my sister's garage for a while, you know. I mean, I don't end up staying there that long, but my idea is I'm going to LA, I'm going to get this job, and I'm going to get an apartment, and I'm going to see where this takes me. And because the pathway to becoming a professional photographer is to assist first. If you want to start, you know, this was like in the editorial world. You have to remember that like magazines actually mattered back then,
Yep.
and we're not in like the blogosphere. Like none of that is relevant yet. It's all about editorial. And so I'm trying to pursue this path. And so I'm at my sister's house, this is not working out. Like, this is not like she's in the Inland Empire. Like, this is 2 hours of driving on a good day each direction to try and get to LA. And so I'm there for maybe a couple of weeks, and everyone goes away one weekend, and I have the whole house to myself. She has like 4 or 5 roommates. It's like a, kind of chaotic environment. And I go to bed at like 7 o'clock. Like, the house is quiet. I'm exhausted. I go to bed. I wake up Saturday morning, and there's like dudes in sleeping bags all over the living room floor, and I don't know where they've come from, but they as they start to wake up and like make their way out to the backyard where I'm like laying by the pool, they start telling me like they were all at a show the night before, they're friends with one of the roommates, he brought them back, gave them a place to crash, they're like traveling with this band from Boston called The Slip, and they're just like on the road as like the roadies for this band. They're about the same age as me, and they're like, well, we're in Santa Barbara tonight, you should come. So I go with them to the show. And these guys start telling me about music festivals. And then Fish is playing at Irvine the next week. So I go to Fish. And now I'm like starting to, get into this. And so then LA doesn't work out. I come back to New York. And these guys all lived in Boston, but they would come to New York all the time to go to shows at the Wetlands, which is like, that's the club that the guy who owns Brooklyn Bowl, he took that over when he was barely older. He's barely older than me. He was like in his early 20s, I think, when he took over the Wetlands. But that's like where jam bands like really got started.
The Wetlands.
The Wetlands. And it was in Tribeca, and it closed the week of 9/11 because the building was like being turned into condos. So it was just like the timing. Like their final shows got canceled, but that's like, it was already going to close. But so these guys are coming from Boston to go to shows at the Wetlands. And so now they're sleeping on my living room floor, and I'm going to the Wetlands with them. And these shows are going like till 5, 6 in the morning. We're driving back at sunrise driving up the West Side Highway, and this is just like blowing my doors open, and I'm just loving this, and I'm meeting people, and I'm dancing, and I'm having a good time, and I'm just seeing that this world exists. So now I'm learning about music festivals, which are really just getting started. And so this is the winter of 2001. So the spring of 2001, I'm doing like temp jobs. I'm signed up with a bilingual temp agency, and I'm like staffed at Louis Vuitton and Credit Suisse, and I'm just doing like the most like boring work, And I start Googling festivals and learning about festivals, and I reach out to that guy, and he says yes, I can use his website. And so it was like one of those where I was like, I wanted to apply to grad school for photography, and I needed a portfolio. And so I was like, this would be a cool thing to do someday. And I was
grad school for photography.
That's what I thought. I didn't end up doing it,
but
that is what I wanted to do. Either way, I needed a portfolio. If I wanted to be applying for photography jobs or school, I needed a portfolio. And I thought, festivals, like that would be a cool subject for a portfolio. So in my mind, it's this thing like I could do someday. It's off in the distance. Oh, that'd be cool. And I'm just sitting at these jobs like Googling stuff. I don't even know if it was Google yet. It probably wasn't even Google yet. But I'm looking stuff up. And so then I get a tax return from the photo agency job. It's like, it's April, May, whatever, right? And I'm like, I could do this now. Like, why would I do it later? I can do it now, So I do. I end up spending the entire summer of 2001 going to festivals, taking pictures. And
were you just like, let's pack up the Subaru and just travel the country, travel the East Coast?
Farthest I went was Ohio. The first festival I went to was in Ohio, and then I did like all over the East Coast.
Do you remember what festival it was?
Yeah, of course. It was called Hookahville.
Hookahville. Does it still exist?
It does still exist. At the time, it was like the biggest festival. It was like 5,000 people, which was huge.
Hookahville was the biggest festival at the time.
It was, if not the one of the biggest festivals, and it had already been running for a while, and it was a phenomenon of itself. It's a band called Acoustic Hookah. It was their festival, but they would get pretty big names. Like the first one I went to, Willie Nelson was one of the headliners, and
pretty big,
I mean, and I think Dr. John was one of the headliners, and like I can't remember all of them, but like they would get like decent headliners, and so I drove out there, I did that, and then I went like all over the East Coast. I did 10 festivals that summer.
That's awesome.
Going back and forth to New York. I'm still doing the sports photography job in between. I'm also tutoring French to like Upper East Side
Damn, you're a real doer.
I'm doing everything I can to like piece it together.
And I'm seeing like with your life, it was like a roller coaster, and like all the ups have a direct correlation with music.
Yeah,
And it seems like every time, like everything else was just like very vanilla.
yeah.
That rainbow sherbet of music just brightened up your life.
I mean, it was an obsession. Like I was just like, that's where I need to be. That's what I need to where I want to spend my time.
So what happens after you hit 10 festivals in
So you
one
notice
summer?
the year we're in, right?
2001?
2001. So I come home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I go to Hookahville again for Labor Day weekend. They do Memorial Day and Labor Day. I go to that, and I'm at Hookahville, and then I'm like, I hear about this festival in Massachusetts the next weekend, and I was like, it'd be cool to just go to a festival without taking pictures. Let me see what it's like to just be in the audience, not working. So I go up to the one in Massachusetts, and I run into a guy that I had met. I'd taken his picture at Hookahville the weekend before, and we end up hanging out all weekend. And he comes back to New York with me at the end of the weekend. He's never been to New York before. It's September 9th, 2001, or September 10th, I guess. I can't remember. And we wake up, yeah, it was September 10th. We wake up the next day, September 11th. And we were planning to leave the city that day. I was going to give him a ride back to where he came from, but we couldn't get out of the city. And so we end up just walking around the city all day. And I end up leaving with him the next day, and I don't come home for 3 months. And he taught me how to vent. And so I went from being someone who knew how to create to, by the time I came home a few months later, I knew how to make things, or no, I knew how to sell things I had created. He's the person who taught me how to do that. So
Would you call it how to vent?
Vend.
Vend.
Yeah, vending. So like at these shows, like people vend. Like there's vendors. Either it's organized or disorganized or whatever. But it's a big part of the festival community, right? So he taught me how to do that, and that wouldn't have happened without 9/11. Like I wouldn't have left the city the next day like that,
Huh.
So
I feel like, the way that the world works, it's in God's hands, and you would have learned to vend in the future.
I might have, right?
But
yeah.
9/11 did have a direct impact on you learning that then and there.
And it also impacted me in that if I had any inclination of like going back to that traditional, all the stuff that I wasn't ready for at that time, like if I had thought I was just putting it off and I was going to do it later or something, like it changed my perspective on everything, of course, and it just really made me want to be someone who was putting light out into the world. Like that, like I've been struggling for 20 something years to articulate exactly like that, what that was. But like my art is full of joy. Like it's full of color. It's full of like everything I make is about spreading joy. And I really think that day and like how dark that day was, meaning like how just, it was a beautiful day. Like it was like one of the most beautiful days you've ever seen in New York City. Like, but emotionally and like society, like the impact it had, like it was a dark day,
I remember where I was when that happened.
Were you in school?
I was in school. Yeah, it was second or third period earth science. And I remember another teacher comes in, whispers something to my teacher, and the next period or two later was lunch. I remember going to Pirandello's. It was an Italian restaurant about a half a block from my school, and it was on the TVs.
Yeah.
And it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. You know what's wild is we didn't watch it on TV. So we were out in the city. Like we left the apartment. So the way I learned about it was my AOL home screen. And so the AOL home screen was a news feed. And it said something, attack at World Trade Center. And this guy that I had just met, he's out on my fire escape smoking a cigarette. And he was 12 years older than me, by the way. And so I call out to him and I'm like, hey, there's something going on. He's like, no, that's from the 90s. That's old news. And I have no idea. I'm young. I don't know anything, And so I believe him. And then it's, I'm still checking things, and I'm like I'm checking my email to get ready to leave the city. Like, that's why I'm on the computer in the first place. And then it keeps updating. And I'm like, no, there's something going on. And then I pick up on my phone. I had a landline, and there's no dial tone. And then I try and turn on the TV, and there's nothing. Like, nothing's working. And so I'm like, something is going on, but my internet is still working. And so we make the decision to go out into the world. I don't know if I would do that now, but the pier that's at 66th Street on the Hudson River had just finished being built. So we walked over there. And from there, you could see the smoke and you could see everything. And I think we like, so the headline was the first tower, and then that like the second tower happened after or something. Yeah. I can't remember exactly, but the only thing I could do was send my family an email to let them know I was okay. And then at some point later, my cell phone started working, but the cell phone wasn't working then, like nothing was working. So we ended up spending the entire day out in the city. We walk all the way to Houston Street, where there was a barrier. They wouldn't let you past Houston Street. We walk all the way down the West Side Highway first to the heliport. It was where they turned us into the city. That was entirely barricaded with sanitation trucks because of they were using it. And so at that point, we have to turn into the city. Then we go to Broadway, and we walk all the way down Broadway to Houston Street. And then by then, the subways are running again, and we take the subway back up to Central Park and 72nd Street. And then we go to a bar in my neighborhood and get food. And they had one TV, and that's the first TV we've seen all day.
Damn.
Yeah. And so later,
and when that is so impactful that you've kind of felt it, but now you see it.
Yeah. And so a few years ago, when I was trying to write my whole story, I was like, I don't really know what happened that day. Like, I can't, like, I need some help remembering it. So I went on to YouTube, and I found a clip that was like an amalgamation of like all the news channels for that like hour where it was happening. And I was like, this was not I didn't see this way, and then I read Katie Couric's book a few years ago, and she talks about like being on air and like kind of like your teacher getting another teacher whispering to her. Like, she learned about it live on air and had to report it. And like,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, you can't tell my story without telling, like, 9/11 is a key turning point in my life. And so I leave with him.
Yeah, so let's go to like a brighter day. So you leave, and now the clouds are, on the most beautiful day, the cloud comes and 9/11 happens. You leave, you spend the next 3 months learning how to vent.
Yeah.
And you come back to New York.
Yeah.
And now you're ready to rock.
Yeah. And so I end up working and traveling with him for a couple of years, and in that time is when I end up getting the Grateful Dead license. And I eventually separate from him, and I start Little Hippie. The first Little Hippie shirt I made at the end of 2002, back with an acoustic hookah festival. It wasn't Hookahville, it was like a little fall camp out that they did. October 2002 was the first Little Hippie shirt. And I make that, I go to the wholesale district. We're making t-shirts together at this point, but like men's t-shirts. And we're buying them in the wholesale district. This is around the same time as I discover sunglasses. And I see like a little pile of kids' shirts. And at this point, like, no one's making small shirts. Like, the only t-shirts you're getting are like XL, large and XL.
Like large XL, like concert shirts.
Yeah. And I'm small, like especially then, like I'm small. And so I start wearing kids large. I don't want these big shirts. And so I'm starting to feel like no one's making stuff for small people. Like, what is this, And so then we go and we're shopping for men's t-shirts, and I see this pile of baby t-shirts like in a corner collecting dust,
Blanks.
Yeah, blank t-shirts. And and we're like living on nothing. You have to like, we are like hand to mouth. Like we buy 20 shirts, we sell 20 shirts, we can buy 25 shirts the next week, that kind of thing. And so he is like, you can't spend money on those. You can't buy those. That's a way, whatever. He's like trying to talk. I'm like, no, I'm buying these baby shirts. So I buy 24 baby shirts, and we're making our shirts by hand with a heat press. Like we're cutting out, we're having someone print heat transfers. We're cutting them out and we're pressing them on my kitchen counter in my little apartment. And there's bags of t-shirts like everywhere at this point, And so he's like, you can have one piece of paper. Like, that's it. I'm allowed one piece of paper to make. I design a little logo. It says Little Hippie. And I make, of the 24 blank t-shirts, I'm allowed to make, I can fit 7 on this one piece of paper. And I take my 7 shirts to this little festival in October 2002, and I sell them all within an hour. And I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. So January 2003, a couple months later, Christmas season comes and goes, and then I file my business license. I get I file the trademark, like get my website. I've had littlehippie.com since January 2003, and every misspelling of it. And I'm off to the races.
Have you gotten any offers to buy Little Hippie?
I've had a couple of companies approach me and waste my time for 6 to 12 months, but I am open to it if the right opportunity comes along at some point, but the couple opportunities that have come along have not been the right ones.
So that's 2003. What's the next, let's call it 10 years?
The next 10 years is on the road. It is me just grinding it. Like, I am festivals and shows, and I buy a van, and I have that van for 15 years, and I'm just working.
Did you get rid of the Subaru?
I didn't get rid of it. Oh, I ended up, my parents moved to Montana, and my dad took it as his ski car.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so, and then I ended up getting it back.
So the Subaru was really a big part of your family.
Yeah. And then where they lived in Montana wasn't too far from the Gorge Amphitheater, which I've gone to for work and for shows a whole bunch of times. So I would take the Subaru to the Gorge from there. Like, I'd fly to see them and then like drive the Subaru to the Gorge. And then one time I just kept the Subaru and didn't bring it back.
I love that. Subaru just has a big piece of your heart.
And then I ended up leaving it. I used to spend a ton of time in Northern California, so I ended up leaving it there for a while, and I would take it snowboarding. And then a friend of mine ended up, she bought it she bought it knowing it was going to die, and it eventually died. But that Subaru was around for a long time. But
so you got a van, and now you got a van, you got an LLC, you got a website.
I didn't have the LLC till 2011. I had just a sole proprietor, whatever. But so the website.
But you owned Little Hippie. Nonetheless.
Totally, I had a business license. I filed a business license and the trademark. And so my website, I registered January 2003. By February or March, it's up and running. I'm selling stuff right away. Like, I cannot believe that people found it or buying. If you look at, like, I don't know if you know the Wayback Machine. It's like an archive of the internet.
No.
It's pretty entertaining. If you look at original versions of my website on the Wayback Machine, it's like, how did I get away with this? And the shirts I was making, like, none of it, I can't imagine that I would get away with that now. But the thing about me is, like, my business grew as the industry grew. Like, as the blank t-shirt industry grew, as the festival industry grew, like, all of it, like, I was there at the beginning of it. So
yeah, you were making merch. You were one of the first, let's call it 5 people with a Grateful Dead license making merch.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't one of the first 5, but I was.
I'll say you were the first.
Yeah, okay.
First 9. You were one of the first 9.
I was one of the remaining 9.
Oh, remaining 9. Got it.
And then it grew to over 100, but now it's like back under. I don't know where it's at now, but somewhere in the middle. But no, there were tons of people that did it before me because I'm too young to have been a part of that. But so anyway, I'm on the road just like crazy. And so the other thing that happened in the winter of 2002 is that Bonnaroo was announced, the first Bonnaroo, and people were like, what is this? Like, people thought it was preposterous that a festival that size could, like, the audacity of these promoters to have this kind of ambition. Well, it sells out immediately. No advertising. Like, it's a phenomenon. Like, Bonnaroo, like, you can't imagine something like that launching the way that it did now and having that kind of success. But people were just like, it was insane. And those first few Bonnaroos were just absolute madness, like totally unregulated, like chaos, like 100,000 people, like very few resources, like it was wild.
Do you think that the first few years of Bonnaroo benefited from not having social media?
Uh, in that it was its own phenomenon
Yeah.
that was completely authentic, absolutely, yes. And what's interesting is I posted a video recently. I found a video from Bonnaroo 2005, and I posted it recently, and it's has more views than almost any other video I've ever posted because, first of all, people are like, you have young people that want to see what it looked like then, but you have so many people that are looking for themselves in it, and they're like, it's a crowd shot. It's a video of some of my friends dancing in front of my booth, just being goofy, but you can see the crowd in the background. So people are like, the comments are just like, I was there back when Bonnaroo was awesome. Like, oh my god, remember that those first two Bonnaroos? Like the comments are so telling of it, so revealing of how different Bonnaroo was those first few years compared to how it is now. But I've said it 1,000 times. Bonnaroo built my business. Like I
Say that again.
Bonnaroo built my business. The first 10, really. Like the last few, I could have quit a few years earlier. For sure, I did not need to do the last couple that I did. But you asked me about the next 10 years, Bonnaroo. Like I cannot overstate the role that Bonnaroo had in building my business.
So
And
while you're building your business, is it strictly just it's strict? Well, it's strictly just e-com and festivals.
yeah, no, I was doing wholesale too. So those
Got it.
first few years, I was going to some trade shows, and this is where the Grateful Dead thing comes back into play. Is that so? I mentioned that I got licensed by Grateful Dead Productions, and then 2 years later, they closed up shop. So those first 2 years, I ended up really being mentored by the guy who brought me into licensing in the first place. Was he's the person who found me in the parking lot, as I mentioned, and he was putting together these booths at trade shows in Las Vegas that were representing like 30 something licensees in one booth, and no one had ever done anything like that. No one's ever done anything like that since, and that first one was 2 weeks after I signed my license. And so he sends me an email that's like, your signed contract's in the mail. And by the way, reminder, we want you in Vegas in a couple weeks. And I was like, Vegas, what are you talking about? And so I drove to Vegas. And I show up in my van in Las Vegas, no idea, you know? And I had just driven across the country, and I'm like, I show up and I'm just standing in this booth, and I'm handing out postcards. Another way I built my business was postcards, because I ran this business for 10 years before social media, and it was all just shows, just handing up, check on my website, like just obsessively handing out postcards. So I show up and I'm just doing my thing, handing out postcards in the booth, and he's like, we don't want all the licensees in the booth, it'll get too crowded, but I need you, can you stay all week? And I ended up doing 4 of those shows with him. And so they were twice a year, February and August. And so that's how, and I learned about the wholesale business through that. And so I end up with a bunch of store accounts. And so I'm doing wholesale, I'm doing festivals, and I'm doing the websites. And one of the reasons I've been able to stay in business for so long is because I've always had these different pieces. Some years festivals are more, some years wholesale's more, some years it's all about the online. Like I've never put all my resources into one sales channel. And I think that more than anything is why I'm still in business.
I love that. And where are your parents while this is all? You're now a business owner,
Yeah.
a successful business owner, and you're traveling around the country. You have this license. Your parents know who Grateful Dead are.
Yeah.
Even more so now.
Yeah.
What's their reaction? Where are they during all this?
So they had moved to Montana at the same time as I was getting started. So they're going through their own big life change. Their kids are through college. They sell their house in Connecticut, and they go to Montana, and they have a whole new social life there. They're having a great time, right? And so they're doing their own thing in a lot of ways. But one thing that starts happening is my dad starts wearing my T-shirts and meeting people all over the place because of the shirts. And he just loves telling them
This is my daughter.
Yeah, you
Ah.
know, and he still wears them all the time. He still gets a kick out of it. So to bring it all full circle, they brought me to that show for my 15th birthday. I'm taking my dad to the Sphere in August for his 80th birthday.
Oh, I
Yeah.
fucking love that.
Yeah. So they've never, my parents aren't, like, they don't go to shows. It's not their thing at all. Like, that's the only show, like, that they've ever been to.
And what a great show to go to.
Totally. As soon as I walked into that venue, I was like, I want to share this with my dad. And
I feel like he's not going to be on the floor, though.
yeah. No,
No.
I got us really good seats.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got us like a front row 300s in the center. Like I got us like some of the best seats. So he turns 80 on July 24th, and we're going to the August 1st show. So
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So Bonnaroo puts kerosene all over your business. You light it. You blow up.
yeah.
Tell me what happens after that. Now, we're in the mid 2010s. It's 2015 to 2020.
Yeah.
What's happening with your business?
2015 to 2020.
Yeah.
So Fare Thee Well is 2015.
Yep, that's what I was
So
alluding
that
to.
definitely reignites things, and really starts making Grateful Dead popular again. Later in 2015, Dead and Company starts, and suddenly there's this resurgence of Grateful Dead fandom that no one saw coming, and except for maybe me and a few other people like me.
Did you see a boost in your Instagram presence at that point? Or social media in general? Facebook?
Yeah, I don't even know if I was on Instagram yet then. I was slow to social media and all of it because I've never really
Well, I guess
loved
more
it,
so leading up to 2015.
yeah.
You have a fan base.
Yeah.
But did it kind of start to dwindle a bit, and then 2015 comes, and it just went to a different stratosphere?
It definitely changed it. Yeah. I mean, at that point, it was all about the Facebook page. And yeah, it was growing pretty strong from 2015 to like 2018. And then Instagram became more the thing. And yeah, I mean, all of it. It's wild how much it's just Dead and Company has changed. Like it's just
In a great way.
yeah. I mean, I don't know that I'd still be doing this if it wasn't for Dead and Company.
You love John Mayer?
I do. I wasn't like a John Mayer fan before.
Yeah.
I'm not a pop music fan at all. I'm definitely like, I'm not a celebrity person. I never like paid attention to celebrity gossip or any of that stuff. So I didn't have any like cognizance of him, but he's a boy my age from the Connecticut shoreline, and I've always liked those.
That's what's up.
You know?
And listen,
So like,
and while he does fit into the pop like bucket,
yeah.
his music, like, it's just because who he is, if it's in the pop bucket, but
Yeah.
his music is not really poppy, and he is a wizard on the guitar.
His talent's undeniable.
Beyond.
And I also love a good redemption story. And there's no doubt that he was a bit of a jerk. Like, he got famous so young. Like, to expect that he knew how to navigate that's unreasonable. Maybe he could have grown out of that phase a little bit sooner. But what he has gained through playing with his band and the maturity that he's demonstrated and the growth that he has shared personally, which he's not super forthcoming with any of it, but what I have seen and heard him speak about, I commend it. And I do just love I love self-improvement, and I love a person taking charge of their mistakes and owning their desire to be a better person, and I see that in him for sure.
I love that. And when did you know that you needed a brick and mortar?
Pandemic. No, I wanted it before. The pandemic made it possible. And so I wanted to do it like probably starting 2018. Fare Thee Well, actually, I did a pop-up shop in Chicago.
Let me just ask you this. Leading up to Fare Thee Well,
Yeah.
and I guess from Fare Thee Well to 2020, was there a point where you were like, I'm out? I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I need to go get a 9 to 5.
That happens kind of like every February, March. Like, so I always joke about how this business has a hunger gap, which is a term from agriculture, which is like, when all your food is gone and you have to make it to the first harvest in the spring. Like, this business has that rhythm. Like, we're super busy for the holiday season, we're super busy all summer, and then I always have this lag that comes like February, March, April, and it coincides with waiting for spring, and there's always this itch of like, what else could I do with my life, what else should I be doing, and yes, so I would say that's just part of my annual routine.
You sound like so in real estate.
Is it similar?
Oh my god, February
Yeah.
is the February mid to mid March is like a 6 week like lull.
Yeah.
I'm doing this 15 years.
Yeah.
And without fail, almost every year.
Yeah.
It is just like treacherous. And like I've said to my wife before she was my wife, when she was my girlfriend, like numerous times, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And she just reminds me it's February or it's March. Like there's a light at the end of the
Yeah.
tunnel, and there always is.
Yeah. It's tough to have, even as many years as I've been doing it. I have to remind myself, just be patient, just know that it's going to turn around. But yeah, I've had many introspective moments of wondering what else I should be doing or would have done if I wasn't doing this, what might have happened if I wasn't in New York on 9/11. Like, so many, it's so easy to think like that.
Some of that is it's just right place, right time, or God.
Yeah. So 2015, I do a pop-up in Chicago for Fairly Well. It's amazing. I literally sell out. I leave with like 4 shirts, like every single thing I brought.
So when you say
store.
sell out, how much money would you make in one show if you sold out?
Well, that show I did like 20 something $1,000 in sales, but that would be a lot more now. And also, I didn't go to that prepared. Like, I could have sold probably $50,000 worth of shirts out of that shop, but I didn't know. It came together last minute. I didn't print anything for it. I just sold what I had. I was coming from Bonnaroo. I went from Bonnaroo to Electric Forest to Chicago and just unloaded my trailer into this shop and sold everything I had. And I also did a poster for one of the official posters. I was the only female artist to work on Fairly Well.
Damn.
And I mean, not only is rock and roll male dominated on stage, but so is all the merchandising, all the art. So I did a couple of shirts and one of the official posters. And so people were coming to my shop to get their posters signed, and it was a real peak of my career was that week. But I thought that was it. I thought we were all done. It was called Fairly Well. Like, I thought the band was done. I thought I was done. I thought we were all moving on, and it was just
And little
the
did you
beginning.
know, this
Yes.
beautiful man from Connecticut
Yes.
would come along.
Yeah. Who knew?
And here we got Dead&Co.
And here we are. Yeah.
So a few years later, you find your brick and mortar
Yeah.
in Williamsburg.
Yeah.
What has been the biggest benefit from opening the shop?
A few things. I mean, it's been great to have a more settled place. Like, during the pandemic, the business grew so much, but I was working out of my home, so I couldn't hire anyone because I didn't want people coming into my home. So I was it was insane for me. And so this gives me a place where people can work that isn't my home. So that's the big thing. Like, originally when I opened the shop, like, I just opened it with what I had, and it was a place to pack orders and just run the business out of it. So it's allowed me to grow in that way, to have that separation from my home, which is really crucial. Years ago, I had a warehouse in Connecticut that was a similar thing, but not retail. But this has also allowed me to grow the business. Like, I mean, I sell so many things now I would never have sold before. And it's allowed me to grow as a person. I love being a local shop owner. I love being a part of the neighborhood. I love meeting people. I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for
Amen.
this, Like, I just love having, like, I have my own slice of New York sidewalk.
Yeah.
How cool is that,
And
right?
in Williamsburg on Kent, which is only growing like wildfire.
And I had the foresight. So you asked, like, where did the brick and mortar idea start? Like, it actually started in LA on Abbot Kinney. Abbot Kinney is like the coolest street in America, but I was too late for Abbot Kinney. Like, there was no getting in for Abbot Kinney. And I feel like we're building that here. Like, that's coming to Kent Avenue.
Yeah.
And so I saw the opportunity to get in early on this street after knowing that I had I completely missed the window in Abbot Kinney. I didn't even know about it till it was too late, But this is happening slowly. It's been 3 years already, and it's still got a lot.
Growing. Yeah, where this block is going to be in the next year and a half.
Yeah.
And that's and beyond is going to be crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I look at the brick and mortar as my next chapter, even though I'm already well into it. Like Grateful Dead, I think will last forever, but in some form or another. But I need more than that, and this is my opportunity to create something else for myself.
So going into the summer,
Yeah.
what are the next we'll call it 3 to 6 months look like for you?
So we're going to finish up the Sphere residency. We're vending every show at the Sphere residency. And then what does happen after that? I want to do some more work in the shop here. Like I want to paint this wall behind us. Actually, I want to paint all the walls, but I want to build some new displays in here. And so that's my next thing.
Why don't you license some wallpaper? Why don't you make licensed wallpaper and then you could sell it?
That's an idea.
You should
That is
license
an
some
idea.
wallpaper, interview like a half a dozen interior designers who want to partner with you on it, where they have to buy it from you, and now they have that offering to anybody.
That's an interesting idea. Think about that.
That's what I'm here for. Good ideas.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the next 3 to 6 months. Finish up what we're doing and work on the shop some more. And I'm always trying to find more time to put into creating, whether it's art or writing or whatever. I mentioned I wrote this book, but I haven't ever shared it.
I know.
So
I'm going to beg you to read it. I'm going to beg you and beg you and beg you.
one of these days I'll finally get it to where I feel like I can submit it to publishers and I need to make a book proposal to go with it.
So to piggyback on that, what are you reading right now?
I'm actually not reading right now, but I'm a compulsive reader, which means I can't get anything else done when I'm really into a book. So the last book that I read was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which I can't believe I never read before, and I absolutely loved. And it takes place in Williamsburg. Should be required reading for anyone living here.
It was required reading in high school.
Maybe I read it at some point in school since I was an English major, but I don't remember reading it. I absolutely loved that. But I read a ton. I love to read.
So what's one book that you would recommend to anybody?
I would recommend that I recently read Auntie Dunn's book. What's it called? Burn Rate. I think it's called Burn Rate. Yeah. The Bonobos founder about losing his mind. I think, the line between entrepreneurship and mania is a flimsy one, and he does an incredible job of describing his journey crossing over to the wrong side of that line. And he's a very good writer, and I got a lot out of that book. And I also really enjoyed learning more about the story of Bonobos because I came into business before the millennial craze of VC startups and all that stuff, and I kind of was like a spectator to that. So then to get his inside perspective on it was very interesting.
I'm going to throw it on the list.
Yeah, it's a good one. I would also recommend a book called Worn that I read a few years ago that's about the history of textiles.
Worn, W-A-R-N?
W-O-R-N.
W-O-R-N.
And that book really rattled me. It has sat with me. It's a history of cotton, silk, cotton. It's 4 textiles. The last one's wool, I think so. And rayon. Yeah, rayon, because that's when synthetics started. And what it's done to the planet, what it's done to society, the role of women, the history of women's work. It is one of those all-encompassing books that, gives you so much context to understand the world in, but is also very terrifying. It's a wake-up call to the environment. And, so I feel like anyone who wears clothes should read that book. Anyone
should read this book.
Everyone should read. It's a heavy book. It's a long one with a lot of information, but it's absolutely fascinating and relevant. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Now, before I let you go,
yes.
Give me one word of advice for anyone trying to make it.
Yes, action. That's people ask me all the time, how do I get started? Start. You want to make stuff? Make something. You want to sell stuff? Sell something. Just take action. I would also add the word persevere, which I think goes right along with that. I feel like we've gotten away from this idea of toughing it out, and we want things to be really comfortable, and kind of like we were talking about a minute ago with the hunger gap. Like, have the foresight, know that it's coming. Just tough it out a little bit. Like, take the action.
Amen.
Yeah.
Taylor Swope, Little Hippie. The goal for Little Hippie is just to make everyone smile,
Yeah. Spread some joy.
make everybody happy.
Yeah.